Welcome to a print and play tutorial. Today I am going to be looking at building some tuck boxes. I've recently started getting back into Netrunner and I thought I'd build some tuck boxes for my Corp and my runner decks. And I thought, well, let's make a video and see how I do it. So, first of all, you're going to need a template. This is a template that I've got from Board Game Geek, so that's downloadable and printable from there. There's kind of two ways to make tuck boxes. You can either, well, there's probably more than two ways. You can print this directly on card, which is great if you've got a printer that can cope with card. I don't happen to have a printer that copes with card, so I'm just printing it on normal 80 GSM paper, which isn't ideal, but it is what I've got. So I want to make it more flexible, more rigid with some card. And I always like to do a bit of recycling. So I noticed that my work was throwing out a whole lot of old prospectus from last year, booklets. And I said, well, can I have a look at those? And they had nice kind of card covers. So I grabbed a whole stack of those and stop them having to be recycled, because I'm going to recycle them. So the first thing I'm going to need to do is get your card, you get your template, you're going to need a glue stick. So you get a glue stick and you want to attach this to the card, obviously. When you're doing it, you want to make sure that you get the edges, because that's the most important thing, because you want to have sharply glued edges for when it all goes together, and probably a bit over the side. So I usually just kind of flip it over this way and look through and make sure that I am gluing the edges in an appropriate way. I'll get through there, that one there. Different tuck boxes have different designs, so different sizes, there are different flaps on the sides. So you just got to make sure that the one that you've got, you're getting a liberal amount of glue on those edges. If you can see through like you can with this paper, that's actually quite useful. But just flicking backwards and forwards as you're doing your gluing will make sure that you are getting appropriate levels of glue. I mean, you can do it afterwards, but it doesn't need to do it. Oops, that was a bit of a, when you do it the first time around. So I think we've gone around the whole thing. Then I'll do a little bit across the middle, just to make sure it's glued down. Okay, so that was easy. Then you stick it on your card, and then you just push out any bubbles. So if you've got any bubbles on here, that's particularly important on the main area, because you don't want any bubbling on the edges. If you push them out from the center, that means you get and then do the edges as well. Just means it's going to have a nice tight finish. And then you leave it to dry. And then it's just a matter of getting a pair of scissors and snipping it out. You've only got to be a little bit careful of ones like this edge, which is a little bit ambiguous. And do you cut this side or do you cut this side? One of them will be a fold. It depends how the template looks. Typically I use those kind of ambiguous ones to the last. Here's one that I've done earlier, just so we can speed it up, and that was the edge. So I've cut out my template, and then it's a matter of folding it up. Look there, I've got a bit of a white bit on there, so I'm just going to trim that off while I can see it. So sometimes working with a piece of coloured underneath is good, because it allows you to check the edges, a bit like a green screen. And then now you've got it in, you can just fold it carefully. Most of the folds will go pretty naturally, because it'll go the path of least resistance. And we just go through and fold the edges to make those. And so one of the things that you will notice though is, because we have glued paper onto card, it's actually stretching, which isn't ideal because it can crack. But we've deal with that in a minute. It's the price you pay for doing it with paper onto card rather than directly onto card itself. But then on the other hand, I quite like the fact that I am doing a bit of recycling with the card as well. So I get to recycle those old booklets, which is good. And right, nearly there. This is where I should have put it on time lapse. It's probably not the most exciting viewing. Sometimes I have got a ruler in the past and put a ruler down the edge, and so you can see there's a bit of cracking there, but we're going to deal with that in a second. So that isn't a huge surprise. And we'll just get these last edges done, and now pretty much got my box almost finished. Okay. Yeah, okay, one more on here. And all things being reasonable, that's going to be our box. So to make sure it all fits together, so there you go. So that's your box cut out, looking okay. So then the next thing I do is I get myself a black marker pen and I do the edges. If you've got a template that's got bleed, then it's probably less of an issue. If you're keen to go into Photoshop and add your own bleed, you can do that as well. But what I like to do is just to give a little bit of extra black. It looks like my pen's running out, which is not ideal. And you'll see that if you do it right on the edge, you can also cover some of the cracking, because the white paper will show through where it cracks. So that's that edge. This, when it turns over, I'll look at that in a minute, so I'll do that edge as well. The other thing I end up doing is I do so this is like the bleed edges. I also like to do the edges of the box that potentially might be showing once I glue it together. We'll get this done first. Some of this is like, so like edging here, it's cracked. You can either rub some glue into that if you're bothered. I usually just bit of black marker, just takes off the any bad reflections. These are tabs that typically you'd leave. I'm going to glue them down because I quite like to use them to lock the rest of the box together. I'll show you that in a minute as well. The other thing I really like about this process with building these tuck boxes is that I always sleeve all my cards. So when I printed this at 110%, so it's going to be big enough for sleeved cards as well. And of course you can monkey with it as necessary. So then you've got kind of wide edges along here, and so I like to do these as well. So then when we do end up gluing it together, it should look nice and dark, because you don't want wide edges on your box, just because it has a more kind of professional look. I guess if I was really keen, I would laminate the panels and then glue them on. And that's a different technique you can do. You can make the box separately and then glue the paper over the top. I used to do that, but you end up having to cut everything multiple times, which is a bit of a pain. So let's just have a check of how this is going to go together to make sure that I've got all the right edges. So I've got a bit of glue on there, peeling on that one. So you just get your glue stick and lock that down. Probably going to do that edge as well, because that edge looks like it could show, which obviously we don't want. Probably should have grabbed some rubber bands as well. That's also handy when you start gluing the box together. with all my videos. Once I start, I like to carry on. So make sure that my focus isn't going too wonky. Okay, there's a top one here that probably needs doing. You can do some of these once it's been assembled, but it's just easier to do it while it's in bits. I think we're pretty much good to go. So that's your top. It's going to go on the inside. I'll put those like that. It's going to go like that. Okay, so I look at that. I say, oh, okay, so I've got a couple of white edges there. So if I colour those in now, that's going to save me grief later on. I'll just do this one as well. And okay, so that's going to go like that. So that means I need to do that one as well. And of course I can do this pretty casually because it's not going to show once it's under. So that goes like that. That's good to do with a bit more on there. Okay, that's looking good. Oh, that one needs a bit along here. Okay, that's good. Yeah, I could probably do that along there as well. These are going to fold under because I don't need them as to hold the box closed. And I actually find that by folding them over and gluing them down, actually gives a bit more support to the lid, so it closes a bit closer, which is what I want anyway. Right, how are we doing? I think we are pretty much done. Okay, so end of that. Now we're just going to glue it together. And sometimes there's a technique. I'm going to do these ones first. So bit of glue there, bit under there, and make sure that those edges are straight. And I would hold those for a minute or so just to let them dry off. I guess if I was really bored, I could put a rubber band on it. When they are done, then I would do the top. Well, this is actually going to be the bottom of the box. And that just go into there. And then I'll hold that for a bit. And again, depending on your glue, this glue is goes quite quickly. And that's why I'm going to use this I'm going to flip that one under just to lock down this side, just to make that a bit more rigid. Oh, it's flipped off. I'll hold that while I do this. Again, like I said, I probably should have got a rubber band just to hold it in place. It can go down there, and this side is flip under, and then hold all those together. And then I will glue that one under. And pretty much that is my, I'm just going to let it spring apart now because you probably don't want to see me holding it for 5 minutes as the glue sets. And then at the end you can go around and pin any of the edges that might have come through with the cracking on the paper because it's been stretched over the cardboard because they're two different layers. But when at the end of the day you end up with a nice little clip box, and because you've resized it, your sleeved cards all fit in nicely. There's lots of templates out there, and whether they're like this one, which I think is a fan-made one, and there's things like this one is one I'm going to build later on, half shadows. You even got official print and play ones to make your print and play look nicer. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe and like.